Salute, BookTube. Welcome to my channel, the Saracen Salute. Uh, Although we're a bit late, it's almost the end of the first week of October. I want to make this video as my September reading wrap-up. Just discuss what I read in September. Again, a bit late, but better late than never. I tried to finish the books I planned to read in September by the end of September, but it was actually the delays from August that brushed into this month. And I hope I've narrowed down the delays. But in any case, I wanted to discuss what I read in September and hope that maybe you would find some recommendations or maybe something that you would enjoy. The reading month was a good one in terms of the books I read. There was actually most of them were very, very good reads I can recommend. For the most part, enjoyable reads. We can start. For those of you who are regulars in my channel, you know that I was, or actually before I actually discuss the first books, there were 4 short plays that I read this month. And these are the Shakespeare plays, The Tempest, As You Like It, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Othello. But I've actually made separate videos for all 4 of these short plays. These I read for Shakestember, which is an event in September where you're encouraged to read Shakespeare. And I combined the event with Shorty September, where you're encouraged to read short stories or novellas that are under 200 pages-ish. So this fit as well because they're small. These short plays are considered, they're short, they're very short. So it was a combination of Shakestember and Shorty September. I'm not going to discuss these now because I've made separate videos for each of them. You can check it out in my back catalog. You're more than welcome if you'd like to. So I'm going to discuss the other books that I read. And as I was saying, for those of you who are regulars on my on my channel, you know that I've been reading since pretty much I started this channel. I have a bunch of books that I purchased while I was traveling in the Caucasus region of, we can call it Central Asia or the very extremity of Europe. That's the region, I don't know if this book here has a map, but it's the region, yes it does, right there. This is a region, again, is it Central Asia? Is it the extremity of Western or Eastern Europe? It's debatable. But I had traveled to the Caucasus in the year 2022, just after the worst of the coronavirus. Or sorry, 2021, just at the tail end of the worst of the restrictions during the COVID virus pandemic. So I went to the Caucasus region, which is made up of 3 countries today: the Republic of Azerbaijan, the Republic of Georgia, and the Republic of Armenia. And when I was there, I purchased a lot of books. I had about maybe 10 books I purchased, and I don't need 10 books about the Caucasus. So I said what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them and I'm going to get rid of them, or at least get rid of the ones that I don't need to keep, and if there are any good ones that are essential, I'll keep them. So I've been reading a lot of books from the Caucasus. Again, regulars will see that I started reading a lot about Armenia, and now the last month I read this, which was Ali and Nino, a novel set in Azerbaijan mostly. And then for this month, I read this. It's called Days in the Caucasus, also based in Azerbaijan, most particularly in Baku and in the countryside of Azerbaijan. The author is Banine, which is the author it's the writing name or author name of Banine, who was born al-Bannu Asadulayeva. There she is, right over there. And actually, the mistake I did was in August was actually Women in Translation Month, where we were encouraged to read authors who wrote in a foreign language translated into English. And this would have been perfect because Banine she is born Azerbaijani, but she had escaped Azerbaijan and lived in France, in Paris, and became fluent in French, and actually wrote this originally in French, and this was translated into English It was translated into Azerbaijani, then translated into English. So this would have been perfect for women in translation. But me being the silly, lazy, unprepared, stupid booktuber that I am, I could have combined this with women in translation, and I completely forgot that I had a book that fit all the criteria for women in translation. So rather than reading it in August, I ended up reading it in September. Again, better late than never. And we shouldn't make it a habit to say we're only going to read women in translation in August. We should be reading women in translation throughout the year. So anyway, I read this and I was very, very impressed by this. This is excellent reading. Very engaging prose. This is a memoir of a young girl basically growing up in the Caucasus. So we get just what life was like for a young girl. When I say young girl, basically from childhood until she's about maybe 16. Now you would say, well, 16, and yeah, it's a girl's story of a young girl growing up. But 16 in an Islamic, we can say in a traditional Islamic society, this is early 20th century. At 15, at 16, you're in the market. You're in the market for a husband. You are expected to get married. If you're 20, 21 and you're unmarried, you're considered you've delayed it. You're late. So this covers, again, this is a memoir of her childhood, which is a very quickly she has to grow up, not just because she has to get married in a conservative Islamic society, but this is also covering the early 20th century. That includes World War One, and then it includes the Russian Revolution, in which communism is brought into the lands of first Russia, but then also the surrounding region, which includes Banine's native Azerbaijan. Now, why is communism affects her specifically? Because Banine grows up in a very wealthy, she is the upper crust of Baku, of Azerbaijani society. Her grandfather was a peasant, but Azerbaijan is very rich in oil, and so her peasant grandfather discovered oil on his land, and that transforms him into becoming a multi-millionaire, being one of the richest families. She's born into one of the richest families in Azerbaijan. So this is again a very upper class memoir of an upper class family, an upper class girl growing up in Azerbaijan. But of course, communism, and anybody who knows what communism is all about, is about economic equality and taking from the haves and giving it to the have-nots. So her life, just as she's entering adulthood, she's growing up, becoming a woman, just as she's entering marriageable age in those days, young, 15, 16. She, that tension between, well, two things that are the tension between conservative Islamic society and then a European or Western or more progressive ideas infiltrating into the Caucasus. That's one. One of those progressive ideas is the most progressive of them all, which is the communist appearance in Russia, or what becomes the Soviet Union, which heavily affects the Caucasus. And that, again, it plays a role. Her father, being a very prominent, very rich local notable, basically is jailed by the communist regime that comes into power. And all of her family is suspect for being these ultra wealthy family living when there are people pretty much on the verge of poverty or starvation. So again, for those who aren't initiated, I'll go back to the map just to give you. You can't write a memoir. This is a little girl's memoir. It's a memoir of a little girl from the ages of whenever you start having your own. So I don't know, 6, 7 years old until she's about 16, 17 years old. Maybe that 10-year. So you say, oh well, it's a little girl's story of coming of age, growing up in the Caucasus. But yes, there's a lot of girly in quotation marks, crushes on boys, jealousies between sisters, that kind of stuff. But because the story is based in the Caucasus, politics is not far from the story. It's unavoidable, like all the stories we've read. Um, I'll get back to the comparison of this and Ali and Nino, but politics, because of the nature, this is the. I don't know if this map shows well, but this is the Caucasus region, right here. Now it's a very landlocked, very yeah, very remote geographical area. It is almost very hard to reach. It is bordered on the north by the great Russian Empire, right over there, and then in the south, to the south and to the west, it is bordered by two big empires: the Persian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And then to further complicate matters, on the west, sorry, this is inverted. On the east, it is bordered by the Black Sea, and on the west by the Caspian Sea. So they're not oceans; they're seas. They're not anywhere close to any ocean. So very landlocked countries. And then again, to complicate it, there are mountain ranges that makes it very remote. There's the Greater Caucasus Mountains and the Lesser Caucasus Mountains. Again, very mountainous, very difficult terrain. Added on top of all of this geographical complexity is the ethnic complexity. You have Azerbaijan, which is majority Muslim, Georgia, which is majority Russian. They're Georgian Orthodox, but they're very similar to Russian Orthodox. And then you have the Christian Armenians, which have their own very unique church, the Armenian Orthodox Church. So Muslims and Christians in a very difficult geographical spot. So again, politics, although this is again a girl's memoir of a girl from the ages of 7 to 17, we can say, or 6 to 16, politics is never far away, and it's always there in the background. And just the way she writes and discusses her family and honesty, you have the conservative grandmother, you have the more progressive. You see the comparison between the progressive or the conservative grandmother and the much more progressive kids of her generation. Now, again, last month I read this, Ali and Nino, which is a fictionalized version of almost the same period. This was also held early 20th century. It also covers that period between really the First World War and then the coming of the Russian Soviet Communist Revolution coming into Azerbaijan. Again, this also is a story, a novel, a love story, but politics, you can see war, and politics is never far away. It's always in the background in any story about the Caucasus, whether it's Ali and Nino or whether it's Banine's Days in the Caucasus. Again, some very similar. There's the city of Kislovodsk, which is I guess in Dagestan, or on the Russian side of the mountains, where they go for famous as a spa town. It's also mentioned here. A lot of similarities, because again, it's almost the same timeline. Although this is a work of fiction, this is a work of non-fiction. We see a lot of the similarities that push between Muslim, Christian, progressive, conservative, and the changes wrought by the coming of a communism and just a new dawn for this part of the world. But I don't know if I explained it well, but again, if you can find this, I don't know how common this is, but if you can find this, again, highly recommend it, especially if you like Middle Eastern stories, you like, the changes, the progressive changes that happened in 19th century Europe, eventually coming into, again, is the Caucasus Central Asia? Is it Asia? Is it Europe? It's probably the border. I think I've said enough. Just read it. In short, just read it. If you find it, definitely worth it if you're into, again, changes in a conservative and very landlocked or very remote part of the world, coming of age in the modern world, getting new ideas from outside, and all the challenges that brings. And Banine, she's an excellent writer. It follows, again, there's a lot of, there's photos. There she is. That's the photo. And then I think there's a photo as she's a bit older when she's in Paris. Very well written and well translated. Kudos to the translator as well, who is, we'll quickly give the name. Translated from the French by Anne Thompson Ahmedova. So, well done. Next book, you know me, this channel is mostly history and nonfiction. I went very historical here, very dense history. I have a bunch of this author's books. I actually have 4 of them, and I thought if I can read one in September, one in October, one in November, and one in December, I've covered it before the end of the year. And so I started with the first one. This is Michael Burleigh. This is Earthly Powers. The subtitle is The Clash of Religion and Politics in Europe from the French Revolution to the Great War. In other words, this is a history of 19th century Europe, but this is, I called it, in my TBR video, I called it History of Ideas. What it is intellectual history. This is intellectual history, and specifically religious history, how religion influenced European history in the 19th century, really from the rise of the French Revolution until the First World War, a time of great change. The French Revolution, and most of you probably know the French Revolution and how the church was savagely put into place. Reduced. It was the French Revolution attacked the throne and altar, the king or the royal family, and the church, which was pretty much working in unison. But then it goes forward past the French Revolution, gets into the events of Napoleon. Mostly Burleigh, I think his expertise is France, but he covers Germany, he covers the UK. Later we get a bit of snippet of Russia. Italy is discussed. Germany and Russia has to be discussed because there's a sequel, which I'll show in my TBR, my October TBR video, in another video, which is, I guess, the sequel to this, in which, Nazism plays a big part, the rise of Nazism in Germany, and then the rise of communism in Russia, and their attacks on the church and on religion in Europe. So again, very dense history. A couple of things I'll say about it. Again, when you're a historian, the best historian is the most neutral historian, the historian without much, who can be moderate, who can be neutral as possible. It becomes clear as I kept reading about, Burleigh's work as the chapters progressed. Michael Burleigh, it's very obvious that he's a bit of a Christian sympathetic, a sympathizer of the church. Now, again, I don't know if he was to watch this, he'd probably disagree, but actually maybe he wouldn't disagree, because it's quite clear. It's not, I don't think he hides the fact. It's quite clear in his writing that he's a bit church sympathetic, or church sympathetic. Again, this book is from 2005. In 2005, this is the whole war on terror, the whole, September 11 is still fresh in the mind. There's wars declared against Afghanistan and Iraq in the heart of the Middle East. The whole Islamic Christian West versus Islamic clash of civilizations was still fresh. And Michael Burleigh, as I think a British author, a European author, probably bemoaning the fact, again, Europe, this whole period, even I guess till today, very secular, very anti-church, I don't want to say anti-church and anti-Christian, but very pro-secular, very secular. And I guess Michael Burleigh was saying, well, listen, the church wasn't all that bad, and these attacks that have been really happening since the French Revolution, we need to look at it again. The church wasn't all evil. So again, his sympathies become quite clear as you read on and on in this story, or in this story in this book. Well, it is a story of Europe in the 19th century. Um, I mean, there are examples, like in just a few passages I marked, maybe just to share. Yeah, again, if you're an intellectual, history of intellectual, if you're an intellectual historian of 19th century Europe, you're gonna have. I mean, he even looks like an intellectual historian of 19th century Europe. He's I don't know what the word is. Pompous. I like the word douchebag. I don't know if he's even an academic. He is a distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution, a fellow of the Royal Historical Society, and a frequent contributor to the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph. But again, to see, for example, discussing Darwin, he says, mentions of battlegrounds in some countries, a clash between church and state spread from education to health and welfare, brings us to what was vaguely construed as an epochal clash between science and religion. Evolution was not a new idea, Burleigh says, and Christianity had got along untroubled by Anaximander of Miletus's claim that everything was descended from fishes. It had also gradually reconciled itself to geological evidence that Earth was hundreds of millions of years old. The battle about Darwin commenced at the British Association meeting in the wet June of Oxford in 1860. So basically, he was in that passage discussing Darwin and the rise of the Darwinist thinking. But then that's strange. He said evolution was nothing new, that the church. Did I lose the page? I think I lost the page. It was Alexander of Miletus had said that humans had evolved from fish, and that this was nothing new. I found that one very strange. He used an obscure Greek writer who had mentioned that humans had come from fish, sort of just poo-pooing Darwin. In a couple of lines, because he doesn't go too much into Darwin's theories at all, although he's probably one of the leading thinkers of the 19th century. But then, just again, another example is right here. I don't know if this is going to show. It's English. Then he quotes again. He has to show that he's an intellectual historian of 19th century Europe. Then he quotes, it's in German. The whole quote is in German, no translation, nothing. If you can't read German, you're too stupid to read my book. I think basically is the message he's reading. It's just a random on page 268, just German quotation out of nowhere, and a large, maybe over 10 lines of German quotation, with no translation whatsoever. But again. You can see again Burleigh's anti-secularism in the work. There's a chapter where he discusses Russia and the new man that the Russian and especially the Soviets want to develop. Away from the peasantry, from peasant ignorance, into becoming a new man, into the communist ideal. Again, you can see some cheeky, we can call it cheeky comments from Burleigh in his writing. It says here. Many of the revolutionaries being students, upper middle class elites of Russian society. The revolutionaries paid lip service to the people, who were the peasants of Russia, the vast majority of whom, unlike the revolutionaries themselves, were peasants who knew how to deliver a new being or a new man, whether bovine, equine, or human, and how to grow or make things, believed in God, tempered with much superstition, and revered the star and revered the Tsar as the Lord's anointed. So that thing who said um, that comment again, cheeky comment where he says the revolutionaries theoretically were trying to think of a new to develop a new man, but the peasants who knew how to deliver a new being, whether bovine, equine, or human, basically they know how a cow gives birth, because they have to do it in their barns on a daily basis, or how a horse is born, or then humans, because there were mostly most women gave birth in 19th century Russia at home. So again, cheeky things like that. There was just one more passage. I know this is going on, but here he says, the students, the upper middle class and the elite Russian students from the cities would go to peasant towns and spread propaganda or spread pamphlets to the peasants to encourage them to revolt and to again, to develop the new man. It says here, peasants who knew about the injunction to render unto Caesar rejected populist calls for tax boycotts. They used student radicals' cheap tracts as cigarette or lavatory paper. So the pamphlets and the tracts that the students were passing around, they used for cigarettes, to roll cigarettes, or for lavatory paper. Now again, he says that, but there's no quote. That's me, my notes there, but it says lavatory paper and there's no quote. How did he know that they used it as lavatory paper? But again, that was a sneaky, just anti-secular barb, an attack. Again, revealing Michael Burleigh's biases, I think. It showed. It definitely showed. But that's not. I don't want to just criticize Burleigh. This is a very ambitious work. Again, under 500 pages, which is deserves to be commended. That he did this very difficult subject in under 500 pages. Not easy, and he brushes a lot. This could be a multi-volume work, but there are some interesting insights in this work, most especially the role of the Catholic Church, the Vatican, basically in 19th century Europe. Especially in the early 19th century, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, was placed in the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, what became the Vatican, was placed in a very difficult position. And Burleigh there are three examples he does, or he shows. Poland, after the demise of Napoleon, Ireland, and the third example, I think Italy itself. So in Poland, the Polish people were revolting against Russian and Austrian control and partition of Poland, and for a united Poland. But the Catholic Church, rather than siding with the Catholic Polish people, actually supported the Orthodox Tsar, Orthodox Russia, and told the Poles, no, just listen to the Tsar, the heathen Orthodox Tsar. Be good people, don't revolt. The same thing in Ireland. The Irish were revolting against British or English Protestant control of Ireland. Again, the Catholic Church sided with the British Protestants against the Catholic Irish people, who said and told them, listen, just be good citizens, don't revolt, don't upset the natural order of things. So again, the Catholic Church siding with Protestant England against the Irish, siding with the Russian Orthodox against the Poles. And then in Italy, the emergence of an Italian nation. The Catholic Church wasn't all that enamored of the idea of becoming a France on the Italian peninsula, a secular, modern, progressive European state. They wanted to keep Italy weak and keep the papal control of central Italy intact. So they supported the Austro-Hungarians against the Italian people. They supported Bourbon restoration, Sicilian Bourbon control of southern Italy. against the revolutions like Mazzini and Garibaldi. Anyway, so there are some interesting things here. Again, maybe from how I'm droning on and on about this work is not for beginners. I don't recommend this for beginners unless you know your European history really well. You don't have to know it but you need to have a bit of background. Burleigh is not gonna, he's not gonna stop. He's not gonna explain to you. You have to have a background. You have to know what the Decemberist uprising in Poland was. You have to know, who Napoleon III was. It's not for beginners. Definitely not for beginners. So I'll leave it at that. I'll let whoever, if you're interested and you have a good background of European history, you might enjoy it. If not, again, if you're new to nonfiction or history, there are some more basic or more simpler books for you first to understand Europe in this period overall before you get into the weeds. This is very much in the weeds, very intellectual history. So that's that. So now we're going from 19th century European church and Christian history to, well, another European who immigrated to America. For those of you, again, who are regulars on my channel, who saw my last video wrap-up for August 2025, although I don't have the book, I've already given it away. I've already donated it to the bookstore. I had read, as part of my ongoing efforts to clear my celebrity books. I have some books about celebrities, actors, singers, directors, musicians that I'm trying to flush out of my library. Last month, I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's authorized his autobiography called Total Recall, which I wasn't very impressed by. But it turns out that I have another book, and this is a biography of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a cover, but it's fantastic. And it's the life of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's by Laurence Leamer. I read this. So again, from 19th century Christian Europe to Arnold Schwarzenegger. But again, fascinating character because he starts as a bodybuilder, as an athlete, gets into acting and reaches the top of the acting profession, and then turns into a politician and writes his name into American and specifically California history. I don't know why I'm sticking this out. It doesn't have a cover, but this is the I have no idea what the cover looks like, but again, I had read the autobiography, which was the authorized work of Arnold Schwarzenegger, helped with a ghostwriter, but it was his version of events, so it was very everything I had good intentions, everything I did was good. He's not very self-critical, which would be very natural. This is written by a biographer, and we see a lot of the things that that's mentioned here that Schwarzenegger in his autobiography completely ignores. For example, I've got a list here. It says the campaign laws violation. Schwarzenegger, when he was running for California governor, had caused. He's a politician. He was a natural politician, and that means he was sneaky and he was a crook, and he caused or he committed campaign law violations, and he had to pay. I think it was the figure is $4.5 million as a settlement for campaign laws violation. He never mentioned that in his autobiography. It's here in Leamer's biography. The use of steroids, again, he mentions it very briefly in his own autobiography. Much larger, much more represented here. There's a 1977 autobiography apparently that was also that Schwarzenegger wrote. He never mentioned it in the autobiography that I read, which was from 2008, after he was the governor of California, after his term had ended. Womanizing, again, Arnold, he maintains in his autobiography that he was completely innocent, But again, as we can see here, and anybody who followed his campaign, the main line of attack after they couldn't attack him for, it was obviously he wasn't stupid, that he tried to understand California politics and to find political solutions. And as it became clear he was going to win, his opponents, the last thing they threw at him was was his womanizing. That there were allegations of multiple women coming forward and saying, "Look, Arnold, he groped me, he grabbed me, he touched me in inappropriate places. He was very, very rah-rah, masculine, machismo. Women are an object, just a piece of meat," that kind of thing. So again, I listed womanizing and anti-feminism generally. Um, Again, some of the Mr. Universe, the Mr. Universe judge, when he won, Mr. Universe was his mentor. So there was a lot of collusion. A lot of the judges were friendly to him and actually helped him win a couple of close competitions. There's car theft allegations when he was a poor, struggling, starving artist in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica or Venice Beach, wherever the Gold's Gym was. But he had helped his roommate steal cars to make extra money. Hitler admiration, again in his autobiography, Schwarzenegger, he makes it clear that he's been absolved, that his father was part of the SS, or he was in the Austrian Nazi party, but Arnold himself, even his father was exonerated by Jewish groups in LA who said no, we didn't find anything that would um, um, place Arnold or his father especially as a Nazi who actually was responsible for the deaths of any Jews. But again, Hitler made some strange remarks about admiring Hitler, admiring the discipline of the Austrian and German system. Again, controversial. I have here, I've forgotten what this is, mother versus wife. Okay, I think his wife, Maria Shriver Kennedy, and his mother, I don't recall exactly what that note meant. Rivalry with Sylvester Stallone, very, very vicious. Again, he describes it in just a few lines, very briefly in his autobiography, but here in Leamer's actual biography from an external biography, nothing authorized, we see a very, very pernicious, very heated, very Machiavellian rivalry between him and Stallone. Really, really evil, just cold-blooded. And yeah, so those were the differences. And then there's one more just here connected to the Mr. Universe judge was his mentor. When he was running for governor of California, the owner of the biggest tabloid magazine in California had purchased the bodybuilding magazine of which Arnold was such a big part of. And so when that individual purchased those bodybuilding magazines and put it as part of his publishing empire, there was a bit of collusion. He couldn't attack Arnold as much as he would have liked to, because if he had done that, he would have killed the product of which he had just purchased, the bodybuilding magazines, because Arnold was bodybuilding. He's the main player in bodybuilding. You attack him, you're pretty much destroying your bodybuilding magazine brand. So that plays a part. I don't know, was it collusion, corruption, collusion, I guess is a better word, where they made an agreement and said, okay, we won't attack you too much. All the womanizing allegations, all the steroid use, all the pro-Hitler, pro-Nazi declarations that you have made, we'll try to keep quiet on that. Again, that wasn't mentioned in the Schwarzenegger autobiography. It was mentioned here in Leamer's biography. And then just one more thing, I think in this one I actually want to quote before I end this discussion. It's page, I've marked it page 1770 to 72. Maybe I won't read it because it's there's no need to read it. Maybe I'll just explain it. Arnold, again, this is the 1970s, this is the 1980s. He had always projected himself, I don't need to hold this up, he always had projected himself as a machismo man. His magazines were sold to impressionable younger boys and younger adolescent males to say, look, if you take these supplements, if you work out, if you read these magazines, if you do all this kind of stuff, you can also become the alpha male, just like Arnold is. And so his outward image was one of a strong machismo male, and that's pretty much how he lived his life to an extent. Again, the womanizing allegations. I know, again, what Schwarzenegger Arnold does, I think, in his defense, this is, again, the 70s and 80s. Hollywood has changed. America, the world, we can say, has changed a lot in terms of women equality, especially in like workplaces, etc. I mean, I've heard stories. I haven't seen like me working in the starting my professional career in the, we can say, from the 2010s onward. Never see this, but in the 70s and the 80s, apparently, you know, this is normal. You see it in shows like Mad Men, where you've got the males are all the executives and then the females are the secretaries, and then there's a strange, like, it was very normal to if a woman was passing by in the office, you would like pinch her buttocks, or you would give it a smack and say you're doing a good job. It was very sexist. Of course, there was a Me Too movement in the it's changed a lot, but that's the defense that Arnold gives. I couldn't imagine a working environment like that. But apparently in the 70s and 80s, this was normal. But just going back to the whole macho image that Arnold was portraying, Leamer gets into it. Homosexuality. Now, he is a bodybuilder. He's got this incredible body. He's in Venice Beach, Santa Monica, Los Angeles, 1970s, 1980s, just like female or harassment in the office for harassment at work for women wasn't very well protected. Homosexuality still wasn't this very open as it is now, maybe, or much more open as it is now. So it was much more hidden. And apparently Arnold, being the strong, very muscular, with a very divine body, was quite in demand by the older, rich Hollywood homosexual class. These are producers, directors, agents, who were men, mostly homosexual, and found Arnold to be a walking god. And so Leamer discusses it again. I don't want to quote. Maybe I should, but I don't have a specific line. It says here, Arnold was friendly with several wealthy gay fans of bodybuilding and even stayed in their homes. He inevitably became the subject of rumor and speculation about his sexual conduct. One biographer tried diligently to prove that Arnold had hustled gay men, but her most likely candidate told the journalist that Arnold was a good tease. This is an unkind spin on what probably was his conduct, accepting the hospitality and largesse of wealthy gays, even on occasion being photographed nude, but unwilling to service them or to be serviced. So again, I don't think Arnold Schwarzenegger was a homosexual, but again, he's a starving artist in Hollywood, in California, trying to get his acting career going. He needs money. he was a tease. He would jiggle his pecs to gay men again in the privacy of their homes. But again, not mentioned too much in Arnold's autobiography, but here mentioned and discussed by Leamer in his biography. Again, if you're into your, I want to say celebrity biographies, you might like this. Um, it's not the best celebrity biography I've read. Of course, it's not all celebrity biography because Arnold gets into politics later, so it becomes a political biography after. So, um, again, if you're interested in Arnold or California, maybe, um, but neither the autobiography nor this biography was. Just watch his movies. I think that's the best thing you can do. If you're fascinated by Arnold, the best thing you can do is just watch his movies. That's the best advice I can give. Uh, yeah. Two more books, quite related, and I'll wrap this up again. These always my wrap up videos go long. I really try to cut them down, but I end up going on and on. But I'll wrap it up with two last books, which are big recommendations. Again, regulars of my channel will know that I have been reading this year. I've been participating in a year-long event called Historathon. And Historathon is divided into 4 quarters in which you are encouraged to read histories of last period. So quarter 1 is from prehistory to the year 500 AD or CE. Quarter 2 is 500 to 1500 AD or CE. Quarter 3, which is where we are at now, we just finished, is from 1500 to 1820 AD or CE. And then the last 3 quarters, which is October, November, December, which we're entering, is reading from 1820 CE or AD to the present. So because we're in quarter 3 that covers 1500 to 1820, I have used this time mostly to read histories of the age of exploration. So I read a book about Amerigo Vespucci. I've read just books about exploration, and I've continued that this month. 2 books I read. One was by Andrea Pitzer, and it's called Icebound, Shipwrecked at the Edge of the World. And then the second book I read is by Laurence Bergreen, and it's called Over the Edge of the World. Magellan's Terrifying Circumnavigation of the Globe is the subtitle. Both excellent books. Andrea Pitzer, I had mistakenly, I mentioned this in the TBR, I thought this was Arctic exploration of Europeans going to Northern America, the Arctic of America, the Canadian Arctic. But no, I was mistaken. This is the story of William Barents, who gave his name to the Barents Sea. He was a Dutch. These were Dutch explorers who wanted to find the route around Africa, around the tip of Africa, to reach to the East Indies and to China had been discovered recently by the Portuguese. What the Dutch wanted to do was to try to find an alternative route to the north, to go north from the Netherlands into Scandinavia through Norway, up the Arctic, and then hoping that by bypassing Russia, you could reach China much quicker than going the southerly route. So that's the route that Barents went, and you can see there, this is what happened. Stuck in the ice. Incredible story of human perseverance. Basically, they're shipwrecked, cast away in the Arctic, and it's a story of survival. How to survive a winter in the Arctic in the 17th century, in the year 16. I think this is the early 1600s. Incredible. And what makes this book really good is the author, Andrea Pitzer. Because you would say, okay, it's easy to write a history, but you have to understand the conditions. And it says here, Andrea Pitzer is a journalist whose writing has appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Review of Books, etc. It says, in researching Icebound, she went on 3 expeditions to the Arctic, retracing William Barents' routes and learning sailing tradecraft. Currently, she lives with her family near Washington, D.C. And you can tell she's done her research, because it's very hard to imagine what it was like to be stranded in the Arctic unless you've been there. And it seems that Pitzer, Andrea Pitzer, was there. She actually did her research. She went 3 times, as it says in the bio, uh, and it shows, because it's very difficult to write about Arctic exploration without having ever been to the Arctic. So kudos to her for doing that. Very, very interesting. Here I just saw a map. Did I lose it? Okay, that's not the best map. Maybe just to give a better geographical explanation of what I tried to explain, what these explorers were trying to do. Oh, this map is also very... basically, that's your Amsterdam, and they're going, this is the coast of going over Scandinavia into Russia, into the Arctic seas of northern Russia. Again, incredible book. The stories, the difficulties they faced when they were again, spoiler, shipwrecked in the Arctic. Not really shipwrecked. It's just their ship got stuck in the ice and couldn't move. But what are you gonna do? Again, there's no natives for them to attack or to kill, as other explorers did with abandon, with relish. The biggest enemy they faced was polar bears. There's a lot of polar bears here, polar bear attacks, just riveting stuff. And then, of course, tragedy, tragic endings, but again, a very good book, highly recommended. And just like other books you've read, I read also the story of Mayflower, the first pilgrims who arrived in America, and the Jamestown colony. I read it last month, a biography of John Smith. Similar thing here. The best thing the European explorers, the number one thing they learned was, instead of attacking the natives, the best thing to do was to learn from them. And that's the same thing Arctic explorers. Barents was one of the first. But what future Arctic explorers learned, the best way to do is to actually follow the ways of the natives, which is to travel light, to travel in small groups, to learn from the natives, rather than to have an adversarial relationship. And speaking of adversarial relationships with natives, this story by Laurence Bergreen, wow. One of my commenters actually said this was really good. Having read it, I agree. What a story. Just the story, the premise, the circumnavigation of the world, of the known world. Continent after continent, land after land. But again, Magellan, a headstrong man. The whole armada was started with 5 ships, 260 sailors. By the time they get back to Spain, there's 1 ship, I think 18 crew member survive. The whole armada was doomed from the beginning. Magellan is Portuguese, but he flies for Spain. There's a big rivalry between the Portuguese and Spanish, and that dooms the armada really from the moment it left the Spanish port. What happens when they arrive in Brazil, as they go down south, what is now Argentina, around the Cape, what is now called the Straits of Magellan, around South America, and then finding another ocean, which is the Pacific Ocean, and just sailing for months. And then once well, let's backtrack. You're in South America, they meet natives again, just like the Mayflower pilgrims, just like John Smith and the Jamestown colonists, like Columbus. It's the relationship between the European explorers and the natives, or the indigenous people, always starts positively, but then quickly becomes antagonistic, and then there's killing and death and miscommunication and killing and death. So again, that's what happens here in South America. Starts friendly, but then again, Magellan, a bit of headstrong, not the most diplomatic person in the world, That hurt him. That was ultimately his downfall. I don't think it's a spoiler when I say Magellan dies halfway in the journey. But again, they round the south of South America, the Magellan Straits, and they're finally in the Pacific Ocean. They don't know how large the Pacific Ocean is. It turns out it's huge. They have not enough food. They're on the point of starvation. They're on the point of just insanity. And then they find land. They find land, and it's incredible. The first place they reach is Guam, actually, and they meet natives there. But again, all kinds of miscommunications ensue, and it's not a happy story. And then they get to the Philippines, and in the Philippines, what happens in the Philippines? Incredible story until they finally reach the Spice Islands. Of course, Magellan doesn't make it. Again, Magellan is killed. He's killed by Filipino natives. But his crew continue and actually find the Spice Islands and load their ship with spices. But then they're still 10,000 miles away from Spain. They have to cross the Indian Ocean, round Africa, and back to Spain. So, incredible story. Incredible. Magellan, his ruthlessness. But then, as the story goes on, and after we see Magellan as ruthless, we see him as a disciplinarian, as a almost sadistic torturer. But when he dies, that discipline becomes apparent. The people who replace him, they mess up. And had Magellan survived, he would have kept order, because again, you don't know what you've got until he's gone. And when he was dead, the remaining crew of the ships just met trouble and tragedy after tragedy, trouble after trouble. So it gets a bit sympathetic for Magellan. That's why we remember Magellan, although he didn't actually complete the circumnavigation. He died midway. His legend remains. That's not to say he was perfect. Definitely not. And again, there was one part. There was a mutiny. They mutinied against Magellan. A section of his crew mutiny against him. So he eventually gets over the mutiny. He kills, executes the conspirators of the mutiny. But there were two of the mutineers who, one of them was a nobleman, and the second one was a priest. And he said, I can't execute a priest and nobleman. So what do I do? And the punishment he gives them, I don't want to ruin it, but let's just say it's stuck. It sticks into your head. It's quite. I've said enough. If you really want to know, you should read it. I don't want to spoil anything. But again, excellently written. Laurence Bergreen. I have a book by Laurence Bergreen, Columbus, biography of Christopher Columbus, which I really liked. I loved. I loved. This I also really liked it a lot. I have another of his books about Marco Polo, which I was a bit lukewarm about, but this and the Columbus, excellent reading. And again, the story, the first known circumnavigation of the world. That in itself is an interesting premise. But then all the events that happen all over the world is just very, very enjoyable reading. And I hope that this was an enjoyable video. Oh my God, it's almost an hour. This is a disaster. I apologize for making this very long, but I wanted to cover all of the books. I'll make a video about TBR, what I'm going to be reading in October. Hopefully it won't be this long. But until then, BookTube, thank you very much and salute.